I'm joining with a special guest today, Helen Gray.
Good
Helen,
morning.
Helen, good morning to you.
Hi.
Um, Helen, I know you are a foundation director for Hertfordshire Community Foundation.
That's right.
Um, I heard about this head of operation for St. Albans Cathedral.
Yes,
So,
yes.
how long have you been in there?
So, yes, before I joined Hertfordshire Community Foundation about 4 years ago, I worked for St Albans Cathedral and I joined them as a sort of really a fundraiser in
Yeah,
their development team. But I left there as their head of operations and really fascinating place to work. Obviously, a place of worship, but also a visitor tourist destination in its own right. And while I was there, they took part in a really major multi-million-pound development program. So it was really, really interesting place to be at that time.
interesting. You actually graduated as a civil engineer.
Oh, you've done your research. Yeah.
Yeah. So I admire that building, St. Albans Cathedral is one of my favorite structural building in Hertfordshire. So as a civil engineer, when you walked in there, talk to me about, how did you feel?
Gosh.
Yeah,
I think it's an absolutely beautiful building, and I think there's just something quite breathtaking about it.
yeah,
And actually, I was at Sheffield Cathedral on Saturday, and I'd say the same about that building. There's just something past in a really positive way.
really engineer is not something they born as an engineer and
No.
be as an engineer. So what brought you to
Oh,
a different career?
it's a really good question. I'm always asked this in job interviews. Um, so when I did my A levels, going back a long time now, I did
Yeah.
maths, physics, and chemistry and art. I definitely erred towards the sciences at school. And my physics teacher at the time just said, if you don't know what you want to do at university, go into engineering. There's always a shortage. They're crying out for women to go into the profession. So that, to be completely honest, is why
Mm.
I ended up doing a civil engineering degree. And whilst it was really interesting, and I particularly like the design side of it, I knew I wasn't born to be an engineer. And that's so when I left, I looked for alternative career paths. But it does give you a good, like any degree, it can just give you quite a good foundation.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So now current job as a foundation director. So how long have you been doing that?
So I've been doing that job for just over 4 years, and the
Okay,
time has literally
brilliant.
flown.
And you
It's
got a brilliant team as
got a
well.
really brilliant team. We've got a
Uh,
small but perfectly formed team.
yeah.
And yes, I think particularly over the past year, the team stepped
Mm,
up in a way that I could, only wish and hope, and they did. So I'm really
yeah,
fortunate.
yeah. So Helen, we all talk time and time and again about COVID, how it changed everyone's life, individuals, families, and communities, and
Yeah.
everything. What does community mean to you?
It's a really good question. I asked my eldest son, who's 13, I asked him this on the way to school this morning to see what he said.
Yeah.
And he said, I think it's a group of people with a shared common purpose. And I think he's right. And I suppose I'd take it a step further. I think it is. It's obviously a collection of people
Mm,
united for some reason. It could be a shared belief, it could be geography, a shared vision. And I think COVID in particular highlighted the value and the immense benefit of being part of an active, healthy community. And just a really small scale example, on my street, we'd moved a couple of years ago. We knew our neighbours a bit, but not well. And because of COVID, someone on the street set up a WhatsApp group. And actually, we all started doing things really proactively
absolutely.
for our neighbours in a way that perhaps we might not have done before. So I think community is about people who are in a position to helping
Mm,
others who perhaps do need
mm.
help.
Yeah, that's good. Excellent. And also, until most recently as well, the immigrations, and you can see there's different, including Afghan arrivals coming into this country.
Absolutely.
And do you still believe there's a fractured communities?
That's a really good question. I'd love to be able to say with absolute confidence no, but actually, I think what COVID highlighted, and
Yeah,
it's been in all the national press, is I suppose, the disparity between certain communities and how badly some communities were affected versus others. So there's some way to go, isn't there? And I think it would be wrong to say that there wasn't a way to go.
Brilliant. One of the reasons we brought you in here, where you are as a foundation director, we are thinking along the line how we can mend these fractured communities, and we can bring out, there are some communities are tucked under. We want to bring out, because they got certain ideas and,
absolutely.
To bring out. Yeah. Tell me about HCF.
So we're a community foundation for the county, and there are about 47 community foundations now across the UK. So most counties have a local community foundation, and we're all slightly different, but we all perhaps have a very shared common purpose, which is we want to raise money locally. And we do that by working with local donors, philanthropists, and then we connect that money, that charitable giving, to local need. So as a community foundation, we do a lot of research into the county so that we know when we award a grant, it is going to an identified social need or an area recognised as being a deprived area. And all community foundations work in a similar way. And the model of a community foundation actually came over from the States just over a century ago, when a local banker, I think in Cleveland, recognised that he did have a privileged life. He was fortunate his friends were in a similar position, and yet streets away from him, people were living in absolute poverty, and he wanted to do something about that. And that is exactly what HCF seeks to achieve.
Brilliant. So in another way, the HCF will work with the communities and also the professionals.
Yes, so, in a way, we're a conduit. We kind of link people who want to give charitably locally to local need. And I would be the first to say that, particularly over COVID, it's the charitable groups we support that are doing the frontline work. They're the people doing the amazing work. And in one way, we're perhaps one step removed because we are passing on the money. But I suppose that gives us a really interesting oversight of what motivates people to give versus what the need is and how it's changing, and particularly how it changed because of COVID.
Do you see a lot of donors fatigue right now, or?
Sorry, do I see a lot of donors
coming forward to give, or?
I wish I had a queue at my door every morning. I have to say, it's a key part of my job, and I feel I work really hard to engage people with HCF. And the really nice thing is, once an introduction is made, once we've identified someone who has any vague interest in local giving, those conversations are really, really rewarding. And I think if more people knew that giving through HCF was a really effective, very efficient way of supporting local community, I'm sure we'd have more donors. So that's the job for HCF, to raise our profile, raise the profile of the local voluntary sector, and make people aware what an incredible contribution it makes in Hertfordshire.
A couple of years ago, when the COVID started during March 2020, there are many individuals and charities. Everyone came forward. They want to help people. So now we'll come to a stage. Vaccination is come out and rolled out very nicely, and we're getting there as a COVID recovery plans and all these. So what does HCF does in terms of COVID recovery fundings and plans? What do you have?
So back in March last year, we launched an emergency grant making programme, I think within a couple of days of everyone going into lockdown. And we also in parallel launched a fundraising appeal. That has really come to an end, but HCF always has open grant programmes, and the best place to look for information is our website. If you just Google Hertfordshire Community Foundation or use another search engine, have a look on our grants page, and we're really receptive, and we are looking to fund projects which have a link to COVID, because the impact of COVID is going to be felt for months, years to come, and that's where we want our funding to be directed.
Is it quite straightforward to fill your forms, or?
That's a really good question, and it's something I think about every day virtually. And I'm reading a book on modern grant making at the moment, and we do review our application form. We are really desperately keen that our processes don't put people off applying. We've just added a bit to our website so that if anyone wants to apply for funding where English isn't their first language,
Great.
email us and we will set up translation services, because as you've said, there are communities out there who perhaps don't know we exist. There may be barriers that we don't necessarily see, although I think we're beginning to understand them. So please get in touch with us and we will do everything we can to support you in making an application, and just helping you. And language skills support is available.
Brilliant. So what is your website?
It's www.heartscf.org.uk.
Okay. In other words, you're saying you don't need to go and find a bid writers or all these.
You really shouldn't. And I have to say, in my previous lives, I've written so many grant applications that I think I've got a really good understanding of what it's like to be on the other side. And the most depressing thing is having to jump through a million hoops to get funding. And we've got to be honest, the grants we award are not enormous. There are much bigger funders out there. I hope we grow and become one of those bigger funders. But for now, a typical grant's probably about £5,000 or a little bit less. So we can't expect people to do silly amounts of work to apply. The other thing I'd say is we don't look at, obviously if an application is written well, it's helpful, but that is not the be all and end all. The grants team are so skilled. They can spot a good project or a good opportunity. It does not have to be written. You don't have to have an English degree to write an application. Just jot your ideas down. Be brief if you need to be brief. But as I say, language skills support is available, and we'd love people to take us up on that offer so that we can extend our reach further.
Yeah. So you reach out to the disabilities people as well?
Absolutely, yes. We fund. We're a really broad funder, so we fund, I think, virtually every social need you could think of, whether it's child poverty, domestic violence, children with learning disabilities, adults, whatever it is, loneliness, isolation. We do fund projects that tackle those issues.
Yeah. So do they have to be a registered charity to apply for your fundings?
They don't. So when you apply, we'll ask you how you're constituted.
Okay.
So you may be a registered charity with the Charities Commission, or you may be a KIC or another sort of organisation. We're really open to different types of organisation. We will ask you a little bit about your governance. Okay. And it's probably worth stressing that we don't ask to make it hard. We ask those questions because it's really important that we can say to our donors, we've done our homework and we think this is a good organisation to support.
Brilliant. Okay. So you probably know this, whether in the neighbourhood or in the communities, there are individuals and a family going through hardship during this COVID.
Absolutely.
Is there anything HCF got plans to help, or do you have already some?
Yeah, no, and again, a really good question. Most of our grant making goes to small charitable groups, to grassroots organisations, but we do have two funds which support individuals directly. One of them is called our Children's Fund, and it's just celebrated its 25th anniversary, and it was set up by a lady called Joanna Mason in St Albans. She did not need her child benefit, and she recognised that other people really did need it. So she set up a charitable fund at HCF, and thanks to her, hindsight at the time, we now have a fund where teachers, health professionals, anyone supporting a family, a social worker, can apply to us for a grant of up to £300 to fund something like a child's bed, a washing machine, essential items. Regrettably, we don't have the scale of funding that allows us to fund everything. I wish we could. But all the guidelines are on our website, so please take a look. And we've seen a really steep increase in the number of applications we're receiving. Yeah. I think what's particularly sad is that a lot of those families have had some experience of domestic violence, so they've had to flee the family home at very short notice. They've been temporarily housed, and then they are given accommodation and very often that accommodation is completely empty.
That's so brilliant, though, actually, because I'm thinking along just during the COVID, there are certain communities they had a bit more, impact, during the
Absolutely.
COVID.
Yeah.
You can see some of the ethnic minorities
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
had a group. I think so. Some groups are actually focusing on whether it's a vaccination or whether it's a food poverty or
Yeah.
anything. And I can see from you that you got different languages to help and all these. That's amazing. And
Do you know, it's a step forward, and as a funder, I think we can always do more. I'll never be satisfied because I think there's always more we can do to improve. And I'm not naive enough to think that there aren't barriers there that perhaps I don't recognise because of my own personal background. But I think the message I'd love to get out is please talk to us. We're a really friendly, really welcoming funder. We don't want to, we want to work in partnership with groups. And if people come to us, we would love to have those conversations.
Brilliant, yeah. In Hertfordshire, we got different towns, and we are here in Watford. Watford is the most diverse
Absolutely.
communities, and this will really help. Is that all the information I found on your website?
It's all on our website, and if you can't find what you're looking for, just drop us an email. We've got a general email address, which is office@heartcf.org.uk, and please just reach out, have a chat with us. Don't feel you've got to have all the information to hand when you pick up the phone. We would love to have a chat, and we genuinely want to support new groups, not for the sake of there being a new group, but because we know that there are groups out there that probably haven't heard of us, haven't accessed funding yet, and we would like to be able to help some of those groups. And in particular, we do like to, or we are in a position to fund groups that are starting up, and we saw a lot of groups set up last year in response to COVID. In fact, quite a few groups that span out from churches, so tackling things like food poverty, loneliness, isolation. And I think HCF is fortunate in that we have the ability to support groups as they set up.
We shouldn't forget our young people, actually, because they had a big impact on loneliness and the transition between primary school going to secondary.
I know.
So what kind of support you got for the young people?
So I suppose thinking about the grants we've awarded, mental health is, in fact, we did 2 surveys. We did a survey back in May and a survey over the summer this year, asking the voluntary sector, we asked lots of really interesting questions, but one of the questions is, what do you see as the most the sort of the issues that are coming out because of COVID? And mental health in both our surveys is ranked as the number one key concern. It's been described as a ticking time bomb. And yes, I think a bit like loneliness and isolation, mental health has affected every single age group. There's not a single age bracket where you can say it's been particularly impacted. It's across the group. And like yourself, I have school-aged children, and my children did have access to computers and Wi-Fi. Well, many kids didn't. So there was a huge digital divide. Food poverty has got worse. We're heading into winter, and we recognise that fuel poverty is, going to be worse than probably ever before. So there's a lot going on, and children have been particularly impacted. But the good news is that there are groups and organisations out there providing mental health support.
Brilliant.
And I think that's what a lot of young people probably need at the moment.
I tell you what, the words you're given today, the young people watching today, they probably feel lonely, but they're not lonely. They're together with us.
They are, absolutely. Yeah.
Very good.
And I think probably some of the things they feel are felt by the older generation. And, I suppose I'm middle-aged, sadly, but probably by our age group as well.
Brilliant. Right now, the COP26 is going on.
Yes.
And the world is talking about environmental and, protect the planet and everything. There should be lots of things happening, how these people are going to be changing their lifestyle and everything. So is there any plans in HCF to support?
There are, and it's something we've been talking about for a while, and it's been an aspiration, I think, probably of mine in particular, pretty much since I joined HCF. And we were really, really fortunate that we were given an unrestricted donation recently. And that has enabled us, as of last week, to launch an environmental fund. So actually now, and we have, I think it's fair to say we've funded environmental projects in the past, but now we're specifically requesting or seeking applications with an environmental sort of focus. And that could be a project, it could be something as simple as litter picking, right through to anything that improves air quality, increases education around global warming, anything that on a local level will improve the environment. Again, it could be biodiversity. We're thinking very broadly on this. We don't have limitless funds, but this is a step in the right direction. And it's something I hope I can engage more local donors to support going forward.
People watching this podcast, they may come forward and they want to support you to give this.
Well, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Call me anytime.
Certainly. So does the schools work with HCFs?
A little bit. We support some schools. As a general rule, we can't support. I mean, there are hundreds of schools in the county,
Of course, yeah.
so we don't. That's not sort of a primary area of focus, but we do support in particular special needs schools. We've done some really, I think, some really valuable grant making in that area.
Yeah. So some individual teachers, whenever I visit the school, they ask me, I am doing this project, would you able to support? Are they up to apply for anything like that?
Children,
Yes.
gosh, that's a really good question. If only my grants managers were sitting next to me, they could answer that better than me. I suppose all I could say on that is have a look at the funding programs available, or call us and talk through what it is you've got in mind.
I remember that there's one particular school I went, and they wanted to plant trees. They wanted some fundings, and they were asking me these sort of things. People do have some projects and they want to apply for it. So that's a good question. So we will probably find out about that.
Yes, that's a good. I will come back to you on that.
That's great. So what sort of training and support you provide?
So we've got two team members, two colleagues who work. They're dedicated to training and development for the voluntary sector. A lot of our training is focused at providers of adult social care, and the reason for that is because it's funded by the county council, and that's sort of a restriction that comes with that. Saying that, Louise and Anna and the team are really keen to support the voluntary sector really in its entirety. So there's a lot of opportunity to take part in training. Training ranges from things like safeguarding, safe manual handlings, food hygiene, first aid, some sort of, kind of very essential types of training that your staff might need, right up to developmental strategic development. So I'd like to think we offer a really good range. And again, in the survey that we conducted over the summer, feedback indicated that obviously fundraising is such a huge, it is a burden, to be honest, isn't it? It's a burden wherever you work.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Otherwise you can't sustain charity.
Exactly. And I relate to that because it's a part of my job as well, to make sure that there's enough fundraising for HCF. So, but we offer training on fundraising, how to apply to trusts and foundations. We're now involved with Crowdfunder Hertfordshire, and it's probably worth just mentioning that because it is another opportunity for groups and organisations to access funding. It's just a different way of doing it. Rather than writing a grant application through HCF or another trust and foundation, if you look for Crowdfunder Hertfordshire,
I'm about to ask you.
if you, and again, Google it, or there's a link from our website, there are a number of funds on there. And it's a different way. It's just another tool for fundraisers to access funding.
You don't charge for any of these?
No, not at all. No, absolutely not.
One of the crowdfundings or any other platform you use online,
there's
a huge cost involved. And
so HCF, I have to clarify, HCF does not apply any fee at all. Crowdfunder does take a fee, but I think it's a really justifiable fee because they're providing a service. And just going back to training very quickly, just to be clear, we do charge for our training, but it
Okay,
is
yeah,
really
sure.
heavily subsidised. So a typical training course might cost £25.
Mm.
If there's a group or organisation out there where £25 is prohibitive, again, please talk to us. Just pick up the phone. But we feel that we've set it at a level which enables most people to access it, which is important.
Brilliant. So you work very closely with businesses, Hertfordshire County Council, or local council?
Yeah, we've got
yeah.
lots of, bit like you,
Okay.
lots of really important stakeholders. Our number one stakeholder is obviously the local voluntary sector. Without people like you doing your amazing work and all the other groups we support, there wouldn't be a need for HCF. And then we partner closely with the county council, who've been really supportive over recent years, and I think they're really good at identifying pockets of funding that perhaps we can help them to distribute through our grant systems. The Police Crime Commissioner, we work closely with David Lloyd to support some of his funding, and and local businesses have been brilliant, and we'd love to work with more local businesses, and that's a bit of a push at the moment at HCF.
Some of the people were asking about the time frame, the time they apply, and how fast
Yeah,
your
the decision making is. Yeah, and that's a really again, it varies a bit from program to program. We have at HCF, there are generally 4 grants committee meetings a year.
Okay.
So roughly speaking, decisions are made on a quarterly basis. During COVID, at the height of the pandemic early last year, we scrapped that system and we reviewed applications on a weekly rolling basis. It was because we recognised the need and the urgency to get funding out very, very quickly. And I think that worked really well. I think my grants team might all resign if I said we were going to carry on working like that, because it was quite full on for the year and a bit that we did it. But we appreciate the need to come back quickly to applicants, and we work as quickly as we can. I think at the moment we are still experiencing an exceptionally high volume of applications, and it's not an excuse. It's just, if we take longer to come back to you, it's not because we're not trying really hard, it's because we're just slightly swamped.
Helen, thank you so much. I know you're a very busy lady.
Oh,
and you and your team doing some amazing work. I have to tell the people watching in the podcast, this is a great place for you to come and to know about the fundings and grants from Hertfordshire Community Foundation. Go to the website, visit.